This question comes from Danny. In the whole Stephanie McMahon Triple H storyline in 1999, do you think it would have made more sense to have Test be the one to wrestle Triple H instead of Vince McMahon? After all, Test is the one who got shafted, and having him face Triple H could have elevated him. Well, we can't have that now, can we? We don't want to elevate the poor guy, God forbid. Vince McMahon was more over than Test was at that time, and maybe they just figured that match would draw better on pay-per-view, but I agree with you. Test was hot at that time. He was over. That SummerSlam match with Shane McMahon, the Love Her or Leave Her match, that really helped put him on the map. And after Triple H ruined their whole wedding ceremony on Raw, it would have made complete sense to have Test get revenge on Triple H at Armageddon the next month on pay-per-view. And you could still do the Stephanie turn at the end of that match. The match can play out the exact same way. If anything, you probably will get a better match out of it because Test is a wrestler. Vince McMahon is not. At the time, Vince McMahon was the 50-something-year-old owner of the company. Test was over. He was on fire. He had some really good matches around that period. And he and Triple H could have been the ones going out there for 20 or 30 minutes having a hardcore brawl. And you do the same thing at the end with Stephanie turning on him instead of turning on her father. After that, you could keep everything as is. You do the Triple H Cactus Jack street fight at the Rumble, which is really what solidified Triple H's position in the main event. He made a believer out of me after that match, and I think a lot of other people as well, that, okay, this guy now is a main eventer. Because I got to be honest with you, just from my perspective, up until that point, or maybe the very end of 99, but I think even it was the Rumble match that put it over the top for me. I never really saw Triple H as being a main event guy. You had Austin, you had Rock, you had Foley, Undertaker, even Kane. Those guys were on a different level. And Triple H was just kind of being, pushed as a main eventer. I don't want to say shoved down our throat, but it took, I think, that match with Foley was the first time that I really saw him as, wow, okay, this guy, I can believe this guy is a main eventer now. It doesn't feel like, they're just putting a mid-card guy in a main event match. So I wouldn't want to change that. I think that Rumble Street Fight is one of the best matches in Rumble history. I certainly wouldn't change that. And, you then have him defend the title against Rock at WrestleMania in a singles match. That's how I would have done it. Rock and Triple H was one of WWE's all-time great rivalries, and I can't believe that we never got a singles match between the two of them at WrestleMania. We got 3 Austin vs. Rock matches, but not one Rock vs. Triple H match at WrestleMania. We just got that 4-way with a McMahon in every corner, which, it came down to Rock vs. Triple H, so they did have, a while by themselves to wrestle in that match, but it was still a 4-way match. A 4-way match with a completely bullshit finish. Vince McMahon beat The Rock with a chair shot. Not exactly the way that I would have hoped to see a match with Rock and Triple H at Mania, so I think that's kind of a shame that we never got to see that match. Brian from Dundee, Scotland. I recently watched the, ironically enough, Rock vs. Triple H match. The Iron Man match from Judgment Day 2000. Was the outcome originally planned as a Triple H win? Undertaker seemed late with his entrance, and it looked like a slightly botched finish. The outcome went as planned with, Triple H winning the title, but the time cues got all screwed up at the end. It looked like Undertaker was supposed to nail the tombstone, then Shawn Michaels, who was the guest referee, would call for the DQ, but they ran over. If you go back and watch the end, first of all, Rock vs. Triple H, the Iron Man match, in my opinion, very underrated. I don't want to call it the best Iron Man match of all time, because I don't think it's the best necessarily, but I don't think that match gets enough credit. Those guys went out there, they had almost the opposite of the kind of match that Brett and Shawn had. This match was more action. This match, I think, ended 6 falls to 5. They didn't do the whole, both guys are tied with no falls going into the overtime period. It was all action. The crowd was hot. And, the finish was kind of a cluster of all these different people running in and tons of interference. When Undertaker came back, this was the debut of the American Badass character. Go back and watch the end of that match. It was like the last 40 seconds or so. And, the place is just coming unglued. You have all the McMahon Helmsley people in the ring. DX is in there. X-Pac, Road Dogg, Vince, Shane. Undertaker, Biker Taker comes in. He's beating the crap out of everybody. He's chokeslamming people left and right. He punched Vince McMahon hard way in the face. I think he broke his nose because Vince came up bleeding. And you could kind of tell that things were going a little long. And it's funny because when Undertaker grabbed Triple H by the throat to chokeslam him, it was good that Shawn Michaels, you could clearly see that Shawn Michaels saw it happen. He probably should have just called for the DQ at that point. They had a timer on the screen in the corner counting down the seconds that were left. And Undertaker is not done. He gives the throat slash, so he's going to give him the tombstone. And when the clock hit, I think 4 seconds, whoever in the production truck took that clock off the screen deserves a raise. I don't know if it was Kevin Dunn or one of his lackeys or whatever. Somebody had the foresight at that point with 4 seconds left or 4 point whatever the hell it was to take that damn clock off the screen. Now, even after they took the clock off the screen, it was obvious, okay, way more than 4 seconds has passed. Where's the buzzer? Where's the bell? And they just reached a point, it felt like, where, okay, we can't bullshit this anymore. Undertaker has Triple H up for the tombstone, hasn't dropped him yet, and then the buzzer goes off, and Shawn Michaels all of a sudden is like, oh, ring the bell, ring the bell. But, you know, thankfully they took that damn clock off the screen, because otherwise, if it would have counted down to 0, that would have been even more embarrassing. So, yeah, I think everything just went kind of long. You know, and you could say, oh, it was a fuck finish, whatever, interference. To me, it worked in this situation from the action in the ring, the crowd reaction, the big Undertaker comeback at the end. I thought this was a really, really good match that just does not get the credit that I think it deserves. Theodore Bond. It's an interesting name. He says, if this past year's WrestleMania there were rumors of the Clique going into the Hall of Fame as a group, Shawn Michaels is already a Hall of Famer, and you can easily make cases for Triple H, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and even X-Pac to get solo inductions given the fact that you have people like Koko B. Ware in the Hall of Fame. Well, yeah, let me just stop you there. That's not really fair, I don't think, to use Koko B. Ware, to use the Koko analogy with these guys. I think all of these guys deserve their own inductions, even if they didn't put guys in like Koko B. Ware. You could definitely make a case for X-Pac, for Hall and Nash, no matter what you may think of them, and politics and all that BS. I would say if you were going to put somebody in like you know, Skimp of the Body Donnas or something, that would be kind of ridiculous, and you can make the Koko B. Ware analogy, but I think these guys are deserving of it, so I don't think that's really fair. But anyway, back to Theodore's email here. He says, my main problem with the Clique being inducted as a group is that they were never a group on TV, only behind the scenes, and it just seems like an excuse to have each member in there so that one day they can become a 2-time or even 3-time Hall of Famer, when you think that both DX and the NWO will likely be inducted as a group one day. What are your thoughts on the Clique being inducted into the Hall of Fame as a group? I don't like the idea. Mainly for the reasons that you outlined here. All of those guys deserve to be inducted solo, I think, for their accomplishments. And then you add in the news that, you know, WWE is supposedly looking to induct DX as a group next year, including China. I think it was Mike Johnson of Pro Wrestling Insider. He first reported this a few months ago. I think they would be insane to try to do business with that woman, but you know, she was an important part of the original DX. So let's assume that DX headlines the Hall of Fame next year. You have to think the NWO at some point will be inducted, especially if Hogan ever gets back in the good graces of WWE. I'm sure Hogan would love to be a 2-time Hall of Famer like Ric Flair. So now you're going to induct the Clique? It just doesn't make any sense. The Clique was a group of guys who worked together, traveled together, stuck up for each other behind the scenes, politically. They had a huge impact on wrestling, both positive and negative. It was more of a behind-the-scenes thing, true, but I don't want to say that that's the reason I wouldn't do it, because I'll just give you an example. Jim Johnston works behind the scenes for WWE. Does that mean that Jim Johnston does not deserve to be inducted because a whole bunch of people would have no idea who he is? Of course not. Jim Johnston absolutely deserves to be inducted for all of his work over the years with all of the theme music and just everything he's done for that company in terms of music and what it has done for people's characters. It's become such an important part of the overall package of what you see every week on TV. It's almost a crime he's not in the Hall of Fame already. I don't think working off TV really matters, working behind the scenes. So I would induct them, just not as the Clique. And if you want to do a DX induction, then fine. Do it after you induct Triple H first. I think it's so silly to think that you're going to induct Triple H into the Hall of Fame and have him give a speech and the whole 9 yards, and then after that, you put him in as a singles guy and have him make another big speech. Just do it like Flair. He went in on his own, and then later they put the Horseman in, and he came back for the second induction. To do it the other way around just sounds ass backwards to me.